What a week it was last week. I tell you, we opened up the show talking about the fact that it had to be one of the busiest weeks in our history. And this week, I don't think is going to be an exception. I think it's also going to be a rather busy one as our new president, Cyril Ramaphosa, starts getting business in order. So let's go back a little bit. In his inaugural State of the Nation address on Friday, President Ramaphosa urged South Africans to seize the moment of hope and renewal to improve the living conditions of the poor. The much anticipated speech followed the resignation of his predecessor, former President Jacob Zuma. President Ramaphosa also assured the nation that this is the year that government turns the tide of corruption in public institutions. He's expected to appoint his deputy president soon and make a possible cabinet reshuffle. Political analyst Khaya Sithole is on the line. He's going to be talking to us about this and more. Good to have you, Khaya. Thanks so much for chatting to us.
Good morning, Leanne. Thank you.
All right, Khaya, you were in Parliament last week when President Ramaphosa delivered his inaugural SONA. I know the atmosphere and the mood was completely different to years that have gone by, but being inside the House, what really was it like?
I think it was completely different to what you've seen over the past 3 to 4 years, because the reality here is that the hostilities that have characterized the previous States of the Nation address with President Jacob Zuma in charge were nowhere to be seen, and you got the impression that everybody across the room was willing to sort of really engage and listen to what the President had to say and sort of say, we might hold you to account later on, but we'll give you an opportunity to exactly outline your vision for the country. And I thought that was like the main change from what we've seen over the past couple of years.
Yeah, I must say it was quite refreshing to have the House in order, everybody listening. I heard some people saying that you could actually hear a pin drop in the National Assembly. Was it that quiet?
Yes, I mean, there were moments at which the entire audience was mesmerized by what the President was saying. And I think it was really just perhaps the fresh tone that we're seeing in how he delivered the speech, and the fact that even the day before he had created a lot of goodwill with the opposition parties in the way he had addressed them in his inaugural address as the president-elect of the country. So I think it was just a continuation of that good faith that he has sort of created within the National Assembly. And of course, later on, when he then has to start talking about delivery, you might see that changing a bit. But I thought that last week hostilities were really suspended and people really were willing to give him an opportunity. And I think also, you know, even politicians in the gallery were hoping that at some point in time that decorum, as we used to know it, of Parliament would be restored. And of course, that was an opportune moment where everybody could present a united front as a country to say, we are now beyond the Jacob Zuma years, and this is how we're going to work together going forward.
Yeah, his address was positively received. It seems so. Most people were really happy with some of the things that were said by not only your politicians, but many South Africans, including business and labour. Do you believe he'll deliver, but also be able to, I suppose, keep up with the big demands that are on him right now?
It will be very difficult, but I think what you saw there is that there was continuity in his message. So he became the president of the ANC, having gone on this anti-corruption message, and the fact that we're going to clean up all the things that are the most explicit frustrations for South Africans. So of course our problems are deep and, you know, very well established and structural. But I think in instances where we can see clear exhibits of people really just messing up the country, then those become easy things to tap into to say, I will fix that. So the ESCOM issue, for example, is something that, you know, corruption is not just a public sector problem, but in that particular instance, you could see that we were being undermined as a country. So, of course, we were hoping that we'd find someone who was going to deal with it decisively. So that was the one example that he could put out there. And I think also we have to remember that over the past 10 years, there's been this toxic relationship between the ANC and its social partners, being labor, the business, and the society at large. So, of course, for him, the most immediate challenge is to restore that type of, you know, a conciliation between those social partners so that they can then be able to give him an opportunity to say, okay, fine, we understand your mandate, this is where we differ, but we'll support you on this front. So I think for me, the biggest problem that he has right now is to really just bridge the divide that exists between so many aspects of society and the governing party right now.
Yeah. Let's take a look at law enforcement institutions, because he also mentioned that. And saying that they should be strengthened and shielded from external interference or manipulation. Is it possible that the country could soon have a new head of the NPA, the National Prosecuting Authority, as ordered by the Pretoria High Court? And if that happens, what does it mean for Shaun Abrahams' appeal of the judgment?
Yeah, so obviously in that case, one has to remember that Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa himself is not completely innocent in all of these shenanigans. I think if you remember, even around 11 years back, when the ANC took the decision to disband the Scorpions, it wasn't because the Scorpions were dysfunctional. It was because the Scorpions were doing a far better job than the politicians wanted them to do. And he was an NEC member when that decision was taken. So I think when you then hear 10 years later statements like we must strengthen law enforcement agencies, we shouldn't just take it on his word. We should ask him, how was it that under your leadership as a deputy president of the country and even as a general NEC member, that problem existed in the first place? But of course, when it comes to the Shaun Abrahams situation, remember that the North Gauteng High Court had created a very strange situation where they said, for as long as President Jacob Zuma remains President Jacob Zuma, his constitutional powers to appoint and dismiss the National Director of Public Prosecutions must be suspended. So, of course, when President Jacob Zuma resigned, then that judgment itself was essentially became moot, because now the powers have been restored back into the hands of the President of the country, which in this case was a Cyril Ramaphosa that the court had said should be doing it in the first place. So, of course, what he's going to do now is that I don't think it's in his interest to really let this issue linger on. He is the President. He's got the right to dismiss the National Director anyway, without even having to consider what the circumstances that predated this conversation were. So I think in that case, Shaun Abrahams quite simply cannot be allowed to last. And the reality is that Shaun Abrahams cannot deny that Nasrec wasn't just an election of Ramaphosa. It appears that the entire law enforcement cluster was also elected, because suddenly they've come alive and you're thinking, but where were they all along this time? So I think we don't want to keep a person like that who clearly carried political favor and refused to do particular things because of who the leader of the ANC was at that point in time. So whatever Shaun Abrahams does this morning, he still has to be dismissed.
All right. Khaya, I want to fit in two more questions, and we only got 3 minutes for it, so let's do them quite quickly here. So this is particularly on leadership shifts and changes that will be happening. So I'm going to start firstly with what President Ramaphosa mentioned. He said that they're going to change the way that boards are appointed, so that only people with expertise, experience and integrity, something that I think everybody was very in favor of, must serve in the vital positions on SOEs. Should we expect major changes to the current SOE leadership?
Yes, there has to be major changes to the current SOE leadership. But then again, I'd like to take a step back and question why he would say something like that, because legally, the way boards are supposed to be appointed is supposed to follow those prescripts anyway. So it's supposed to be people with expertise, people who actually have, an ability of how to move the business forward. The Companies Act is very clear on that. So it wasn't Cyril Ramaphosa's vision or his new deal that came through on Friday and said, this is how boards are going to be appointed. This is how they're supposed to be appointed. The question is, why did politicians like him, being members of cabinet, allow President Jacob Zuma and people like Lynn Brown to completely bypass those processes and put in place people who were thoroughly ill-suited for purpose, and put in place people who clearly had alternative agendas rather than advancing those particular companies? So I'm always skeptical when politicians stand up there and pretend that they're delivering a new message when they've actually been complicit in the breakdown of the state machinery as you know it.
Yeah, interesting. All right, let's wrap this up with a look at the reshuffles, because this is inevitable, but it's just a matter of when will it happen. Obviously, we need a deputy president. So quickly, who do you think he is going to appoint, and when? I mean, timing is of the essence here. Who do you think our next deputy president will be?
I think it will be Lindiwe Sisulu for essentially the reasons that we've seen in Nasrec, where he was the person that she was the person that he wanted to add on his list at the last moment if it was possible. So I think Lindiwe Sisulu is the front runner. I do suspect that something that would be, far more unifying in the ANC circles is if Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma is given something similar. So if it's either the deputy presidency or something very high, a profile ministry, then of course it will feed into the whole message of unity that he preached. So for me, those are the two main candidates, Nkosazana Zuma and Lindiwe Sisulu.
Also, just finally, obviously these cabinet reshuffles, some people are thinking that it could be as early as this morning. Others are saying, no, it'll probably happen after the budget, which would mean that our Finance Minister, Malusi Gigaba, will deliver the budget. What do you think? Give us your 2 cents worth here. Do you think Gigaba will give the budget this week, or do you think that the shuffle will take place before that?
I think Gigaba will deliver the budget speech this week simply because timing indicates that it will be very difficult for someone to step in and go through the entire budget and be able to sort of really engage in it. And remember, it's not just reading the speech; it's then being able to participate and in the budget in the vote in the speech, the budget vote against about the budget itself. So you don't want someone to have to go and spend the next 100 hours going through the budget vote. But also remember, Leanne, is that this is still the ANC of old. So the ANC does not want to be seen to be pressured by external forces into doing something. So if we all insist that Malusi Gigaba should be reshuffled this morning, then the ANC will then start thinking, why are these people instructing us to do something? Let us do it on our own terms, which is why he will survive until at least Wednesday.
All right, Khaya, we've got to leave it there. I know there's so much more to talk about, but we'll pause there for now. Khaya Sithole is a political analyst, and we'll continue to analyse these reshuffles and see where we can expect which minister portfolio to move into. All right, right now, though, it is 7.